Hi. Hey guys, what's up? My name is Dom. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new to my channel, I typically make bookish content, movie content, and anything else in between because I like to do whatever I want on this channel, and tonight's going to be movie content. For today's video, we're going to go over the 20 plus movies that I watched in the month of October. Because there's so much material to cover, some of these wrap-ups I am going to rush through. If the film is a rewatch, I'm not going to spend too much time on it. I'm also not going to spend too much time on any films that I reacted to. I will just link those up above because I feel like otherwise we'd be here for 20 hours and I'd rather be here for like 30 minutes. So without further ado, let's just jump right into the video. So the first movie I watched in October was Hocus Pocus. This was a rewatch. I rewatched this basically every year, but I also rewatched it this year in preparation for the sequel. This movie is always a fun time. It is a little dated. The older I get, the cornier it seems to be for me, but I still have a lot of fun with it and I always laugh every time I watch it. The next movie I watched was The Wolfman. This movie came out in 1941 and it's basically the werewolf movie. I actually reacted to this film. You can see that up above. In the end, I thought this film was just okay. It was just your typical monster movie. It didn't really have any deep meaning to it. It was just a creature movie. That's basically it. As okay as I thought the film was, I am glad that I finally got to see like an original film just because this is the one that everyone falls back on. I think I gave this film 3 out of 5 stars. The next film I watched was Hocus Pocus 2. This is the sequel to Hocus Pocus, it coming out a whole nearly 30 years later. And I'm actually shocked by how much I liked this film. I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars. I thought this film was going to be real bad, especially just because of how big that gap is between the first and this one. But honestly, I thought it held itself up very well. Our 3 sisters, those actors jumped right back, easily jumped right back into the roles. It's like they haven't aged a day. I mean, they look older, but when it comes to like acting, it's like they haven't even aged a day. It's like this film came out a year after and not 28 years after. The musical number was real cool. There's actually like one character I was fully expecting to be a villain, but he wasn't, and that was actually very nice to see. I kind of liked our new trio. They're not my favorite like the other film is, but I thought all the actresses did a great job. And they were still fun characters to follow. Could this movie be a little cheesy? Yeah, especially given the end. However, this is a Disney film, so I'm not exactly shocked it's there. And the original is always going to be better in my opinion. Like, I do like the original more than I like this one. However, the first film also has that nostalgic factor for me, whereas this one doesn't. And reading some of the reviews for this film and how like older people reacted, I think a lot of people forget that when it comes to sequels. Like, no shit, this is not going to be as good as you thought the first one was because you were a kid when you watched the first one, and now you're like in your 20s or 30s watching this one. Because to be quite honest, if I saw the first one at this age, I would probably enjoy it, but I would just think it's cute. I wouldn't enjoy it as much as I already do. But again, it's because I have that nostalgic factor to it. But yeah, once again, I feel like this one holds itself very well, and I can actually see myself rewatching this every year along with the first one. The next movie I watched was Gerald's Game. This is a Mike Flanagan film, and it is about a woman who's about to do some kinky shit with her husband, but as she is handcuffed to the bed, her husband has a heart attack and dies, and now she is stuck handcuffed to this and has to figure out a way to escape before she dies. This was a very weird film for me. I have a lot of mixed emotions. It's based on a Stephen King book, and my thing with Stephen King, I actually really do enjoy his stories, but I feel like his endings never land. And that's what happened with this movie. Unlike other Stephen King adaptations, Mike Flanagan did not change the ending, and I feel like that did kind of ruin the story for me. Because throughout the movie, like from beginning until like the last 10 minutes, I thought this movie was, I don't want to say great because I wasn't that engrossed by it, but I thought it was a solid like 4 out of 5 star movie. That ending is what kind of ruined it for me, and I docked my score down to 2.5 out of 5 stars. But I thought this movie was greatly acted, and it had some great monologues. That's what the majority of this movie is. If you don't like movies full of monologues, you're not gonna like this one because the majority of this movie is just monologues. But both of our actors did such a stupendous job, and I feel like it really shows off the main actress's acting ability because the character handcuffed to the bed versus like her inner monologue speaking to herself were like 2 different characters, and she did such a great job at both of them. and that husband, the guy who played him, did such a good job at playing a dick. He came off as like a suave dude, but also an asshole at the same time. Like, I was so angry at him, but I was also kind of addicted to listening to him talk. And there were some spooky things in this movie. In typical Mike Flanagan fashion, he was able to creep me out without any jump scares. However, that ending came, there was that big reveal about who the guy was, blah blah blah, and I was so confused on how I was supposed to feel. Like, good for you for being a girl boss, but also something about it didn't land right for me. So that's why I have mixed emotions about this film. I just thought it was going so well until that moment. I even actually puked at one point, and I mean that in a good way. It was the part where she was taking her hand out of the handcuff, and whoa, oh my goodness. So visuals astounding. However, that ending, in typical Stephen King fashion, it just does not land. Then I watched another Mike Flanagan film, and that is Hush. Hush is about a woman who lives by herself, and then one day a guy is trying to break into her house. The problem is she is deaf, so she cannot hear him and has to try to survive. In the end, I thought this movie was kind of just okay. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. It's just a typical survival story. There wasn't any like big plot twist about who the guy was. There wasn't a plot twist for anything, actually. It was literally just about a woman who was trying to survive some crazy guy breaking into her house, which I actually did enjoy. I was expecting a very corny plot twist. I feel like if there was like a big plot twist like that, it would have hurt the film. And our main character is really cool too, because sometimes she would actually use her deafness to her advantage, but then there are other times where her deafness was a disadvantage, and like it made the stakes, I feel like it made the stakes even higher because she couldn't hear the guy who was trying to kill her. The one thing I wish this movie did though, I wish we heard things from her point of view, because I know sometimes movies, when they do have deaf characters, they kind of lower the volume or they make something ring so it feels like you yourself as the viewer can't hear. I wish they did that. Maybe not throughout the whole movie, but I wish they did it more often. I wish they put us in her point of view more often, just because I feel like that would have made me as a viewer more scared for her. Then I watched The Creature from the Black Lagoon. I actually reacted to this film, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this review. Just know, again, I thought it was just an okay film. I actually really appreciated the guy's costume and all the the underwater scenes. I thought those were real cool. But also, oftentimes, I found myself taking the creature's side because, guys, we should just leave nature alone. Like, they invaded his home. No shit, he fought back. If you invade someone's home, like Hush showed us, if you invade someone's home, they're going to fight back. Leave nature the fuck alone. The next film I watched was Veronica. This is supposedly based on a true story about a girl in Madrid, Spain, who was possessed and then killed. She messed with a Ouija board, and in her school's creepy ass basement. So going to the creepy ass basement was her first mistake. Messing with a Ouija board was the second. Got possessed. She died. Again, allegedly based on a true story. This was advertised to me as one of the scariest movies of all time, so I went into it ready. I had my snacks ready. I was hugging myself tight. I had all the lights off to make a vibe. And this was not scary. Like, not until the last 20 minutes of the film. This movie is about 1 hour and 40 minutes long, and for the first hour and 20, it could not decide what vibe it was going for. There were some scenes that were trying to be anxiety-inducing, but they fell flat. There were some scenes that were trying to show the horror element, but again, those horror elements fell flat. There were some scenes that felt like a comedy, but the humor fell flat, very misplaced. And there were some scenes that even felt camp, which was the most bizarre of all. I truly had no idea what vibe those first hour and 20 minutes were going for. Horror, comedy, campy, who knows? And there was a lot of misplaced music throughout this film, and that did not help at all. It truly was not until the last 20 minutes of this film where I felt uncomfortable, where I felt unsettled, and it's probably because it is the true part, like, because there are police reports about this story, so that's probably what the last 20 minutes were building off of. The last 20 minutes freaked me out because it stayed consistent. Like, the lighting was very dark, sometimes it had flashing lights. The child actors actually all did a great job, including the girl who played Veronica. Like, they all were scared, so therefore I was scared. That creepy aura they kept throughout the 20 minutes. They didn't try to change the vibe at all. The music stayed the same, which was very nice. And the horror elements in the last 20 minutes did not fall flat, unlike the other parts of the movie. So that's why it creeped me out a bit. I don't know, this was just a weird one. So because of how unorganized this movie felt, I did give it 2.5 out of 5 stars. However, I still would watch it. I still would kind of recommend it just because I'm curious what other people think about it. Please be aware this movie was filmed in Spain, so the whole film is in Spanish. If you don't speak Spanish, you will need the subtitles. The next film I watched was a horror comedy called Ready or Not. This is about a girl who marries into a rich family. They got rich because they're basically toy makers. Every time there's a wedding in the family, they play a game at midnight. She chooses hide and seek, and now the whole family is trying to kill her. Ladies and gentlemen in the non-binary, this I gave 5 out of 5 stars. It's one of my favorite movies of the year. We need more movies like this because this was so fun. I really want people to go into this movie blind because I think that's the best way to go into it, so I don't want to spoil too much, but personally I think this is a perfect example of a horror comedy. Everyone's comedic timing was perfect. It was impeccable. Like, every actor in this movie, they all had different types of comedy they were going for, and it all landed so well. The horror elements landed well too. Like, sometimes I was looking at my screen like this. There were a bunch of twists and turns that I thought were amazing, and like I was at the edge of my seat, and the ending took me out. I was laughing so hard, but I was laughing hard because you're supposed to. It was supposed to be funny, and it landed well to the point I was like screaming laughing, like curling over because I couldn't stop laughing. I laughed, gasped, screamed, and cringed all in one viewing, and if you're gonna make a horror comedy, that's what I want to do. This movie is just so fun. I wish there were more movies out there like this. I hope this creator makes more like this, or someone else attempts to, and it also turns out well, because I'm for it. If you guys have any recommendations like this movie, let me know down below, because this was so fun. I highly recommend it. I need everyone to watch it. 5 out of 5 stars. It did teach me though that the moral of the story is to never trust your in-laws. It makes me worried for my future marriage. The next movie I watched was a rewatch. It was Pitch Perfect. This was not my choice. This movie is about the a cappella group, blah blah blah. This was not my choice. I was on my way to a Disney cruise. Me and my 3 other friends who went on the cruise, we all met up in New York, and this is the movie they decided to put on because 2 of them don't like horror. And I will say I loved the movie in college. Now that I'm older, it's still fun. I just don't like it as much. The movie after that was not a rewatch. However, I did hate it. It was Disney Channel's Zombie, or Zombie, with the way it's written out. This takes place in a world where zombies exist, but they coexist with humans, except the humans lived in one part of the community, the zombies live in another, and in this movie the zombies are allowed to go to school with the humans. Like, basically the moral of the story is racism is bad. However, this movie itself was terrible. It was cringy. The music was shit. And I understand I'm not the target audience. Maybe it would have been a movie I would have loved back when I was like 8, 9 years old. However, the music was terrible. Even at that age, I didn't like this type of music. Not one person in this movie could actually sing well. The dancing was kind of cool, but not one person in this movie could sing well. Not one of them could act well. The script was corny and cheesy, but even like for a Disney movie, it was pretty bad. The makeup was god awful. And again, this wasn't my choice. So on the Disney cruise, they have a TV hooked up to your room. They have a bunch of Disney movies hooked up to it. Not to Disney Plus's extent. I think that we were only given like 20 movies to pick from. My friends, for some reason, 3 out of 4 of us love this movie, so they made me try to watch it, and I fell asleep 30 minutes into it, if that tells you anything. But when I woke up the next morning, I was like, oh, how's the movie? You know, they all loved it. They're like, oh, Shane, you fell asleep. And I'm like, okay, let me guess. This happened, this happened, this happened, and this happened. And they were like, yeah. And mind you, I missed an hour of the movie, so that tells you anything. One of the worst movies I watched this year, 0.5 out of 5 stars. When I got home from the cruise, I decided to relax and rewatch a bunch of Tim Burton movies. The first one I rewatched was The Nightmare Before Christmas. This is about a skeleton who lives in Halloween Town. He gets tired of Halloween, discovers Christmas, and decides to take over, and it's a whole musical extravaganza. This is my favorite movie of all time. I rewatch it every year. I even have, it's gonna be upside down, but I even have Jack Skellington tattooed on me. I have a bunch of Nightmare Before Christmas stuff in my life. Like, I got pillows, I got a bag, I got everything. I'm pretty sure I know this whole movie by heart. Not just the songs, but even dialogue, which is kind of humiliating, but also I'm kind of here for it. And I met Jack and Sally on the cruise, so that was real fun. Then I watched Corpse Bride. This is about a man who accidentally marries a corpse. This movie's a real fun one. It's another musical extravaganza. One of my favorite things about this movie, actually, that I want to talk about real quick is the color scheme. I do find it extremely fascinating that the land of the living has a very dull color scheme. So basically black, white, and gray. And it's the land of the dead that is extremely colorful. And I've watched this movie so many times, probably just as much as The Nightmare Before Christmas, and yet every time I hear those vows, I just want to fall in love, and I just fall, my heart melts every time I hear them. I want to fall in love, and I know this is going to sound so corny and cheesy because I'm probably not the first to say this, but I want to use these vows at my own wedding so bad.
With this hand, I will lift your sorrow. Your cup will never empty, for I will be your wine. With this candle, I will light your way in darkness. With this ring, I ask you to be mine.
Then the last of my rewatches this day was Frankenweenie. This is about a boy whose dog dies, so he brings him back to life. I feel like a lot of people sleep on this movie, which is weird because I think it's adorable, and I will say the older my dog gets, my own dog, the more this movie makes me cry. So the next film I watched was The School for Good and Evil. The title basically tells you what it's about. It's about two girls. They discover the schools of good and evil. One girl who really wants to be in the school of good gets sent to the school of evil. The girl who just doesn't give a flying fuck about any of this gets sent to the school for good. It's a whole thing, morals, blah, 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 and 2.5 out of 5 stars from me. This movie was not good. Who would have guessed that the moral of a movie called The School for Good and Evil would be that people are morally gray. People aren't perfectly good. They're not perfectly evil. People are nuanced creatures. Wow. Who would have thought that would have been the moral? Which, granted, the books these are based on are middle grade books, so that is actually a very good moral to teach for that age group, because I feel like that age group is the one that kind of finally learns about that. However, it felt extremely forced in this film. Like, people talking from the school for good was just so cringy, but I guess it's more, like, I guess for the school for good, it's more forgivable just because, like, the one character who's in that school, she's the one who eventually calls them out on their bullshit and stuff. But the school for evil, like, they forced that evilness so bad it wasn't believable. And it just came off as corny, cheesy, cringy, and it was hard to listen to. These characters are supposed to be tough guys, and I could easily beat their ass. I am a woman, I am 5'1", and I could beat their asses. I could beat the big guy's ass in this movie because of how unbelievable it was. In summary, it just all felt unnatural. That is what I'm trying to say. I think my main gripe with this too is that our evil character, I think her name's Sophie, I don't know, the girl who was Lydia in Beetlejuice the musical on Broadway, she was just not convincing in the slightest. From what I was reading, you truly were not supposed to root for her. She was supposed to be evil. She's apparently a horrible person in the books. And I got that vibe. I got the vibe that's what we were supposed to be feeling when watching the movie. However, I just wasn't convinced. I felt like she could have been a lot worse as a bad guy, as an evil person. I still felt part of her was a little too good. And not only that, but the actress herself wasn't convincing, like, at all. I think I think she did a terrible job. Granted, the script itself isn't that good, but I feel like the other actors pulled off what they had to, given what they had to work with. But there's just something about this actress specifically where it just, everything that came out of her mouth felt very unnatural. It felt like she herself wasn't confident in this role. I think that's a huge part of what ruined this movie for me. This evil character was poorly acted out, and like even just listening to the words she was saying and the action she was performing, they could have been a lot worse. They could have gone full force with the evilness, and like it was almost like this actress and the person who wrote the script were too scared to make her evil, which I don't understand, because I feel like with evil characters you can get away with a lot. They could do terrible things, but like it's okay for them to do them because they're evil and they're supposed to. So yes, I believe a character I believe an evil character would do that bad thing because that's how you make an evil person. So why aren't you doing that? Why are you too scared to make your evil character villainous? I don't understand. I don't understand this choice of actress. There were so many scenes where they tried to make this character out to be some badass girl bossery queen, and it just all fell flat. It hurt to watch. I felt like a secondhand embarrassment watching this. Honestly, every time the actress spoke and said something evil, it felt like this actress herself grew up in a house where she wasn't allowed to do these things, so now having to do it grown up, she's still very uncomfortable, and it feels like she's like looking over both shoulders to make sure her parents aren't watching and listening. That's the vibe I got. Charlize Theron gave some looks, and that's basically one of the only positive things I have to say about this film. Oh my god, like another thing I forgot to mention is the music. The music was so misplaced. Like I think You Should See Me in the Crown by Billie Eilish played at one point. Like none of the music choices fit the vibe I felt like they were trying to go for. It was super weird. Moving on. Granted, this story idea does sound kind of intriguing. Like 5 minutes into the movie, I was like, you know, it's giving Harry Potter and Disney. And then when I looked it up and saw that they were based on books, I actually did recognize the book cover because I believe these books were actually super popular on BookTube at one point. So it was a neat idea. However, this movie just fell so flat. And then reading some like Twitter reviews and then some reviews on Letterboxd as well from people who actually read the books, this is apparently a very shit adaptation, which is a shame to hear because I like vaguely remember how popular these used to be. But apparently because of time, like the movie skipped over a bunch of parts of the book. Like there's some characters missing that are super important for later plot points. So it is a shame that the movie deviated so much just because I feel like if they made it a TV show, they would have had the time to develop these characters, make Sophie more evil, would have had the time to include everyone to make the story better, and then therefore this shit movie would not exist. But yeah, 2.5 out of 5 stars. Despite how much I hated this movie, I definitely unfortunately watched worse this year, so that's why the rating's not any lower. So then I watched The Blair Witch Project for the first time. Somehow I've never seen this movie before. This is about 3 people who are trying to make a documentary about the local legend, and shit ensues. This movie scared the fucking shit out of me, which is kind of embarrassing because a bunch of people told me this movie's just okay, just watch it to say you watched it. But I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. It truly scared me half to death. I was deeply unsettled for this whole movie. The use of found footage was so good, and all 3 actors did such a wonderful job, especially reading about how this script was written out. There technically wasn't any script, it was just an outline of the story, and then our 3 actors had to improvise all their lines. And I thought they all did a great job. Like when watching this movie, I truly felt like I was watching a real documentary. So I think all 3 actors are great improvisers. And then the fact that they never show the witch is what made this even scarier. You don't see the witch, so then our characters are just panicking over what feels like nothing, but you also know something is there. And then when they're running and screaming and then showing shadows and stuff, I was so scared. I was watching this on my laptop in the dark in our dining room. I had my big headphones on. If you've seen my movie reaction, you know what those look like. I swear to God, I was watching with my headphones like away from my ears, and I was watching with my eyes going up like this, and at one point I was like looking through my fingers because I was just waiting for her to jump out. Though, like those last 5 minutes, I felt like I was about to shit my pants, and I miss that feeling. I go into these horror movies wanting to feel that. Like I truly want to feel scared. I want people to do their jobs correctly in scaring me. And it's so hard to find a movie like that nowadays, which is why I rated this one so highly. I gave this like 4.5 out of 5 stars because I got what I wanted. I wanted to be terrified, and it scared the fucking shit out of me. I felt like I was going to shit my pants. And I feel like the advertising for this movie is legendary because from what I was reading, like back when this movie came out in the 90s, it wasn't being advertised as a movie. It was being advertised as an actual documentary. And like, I mean, they were missing posters for the actors. So people, some like, I don't, maybe not like the younger generations, but I know like a lot of older people went into this film thinking it was real, which probably upped the fear factor a lot. So if I was scared going into this movie knowing it was fake, I cannot imagine going into this thinking it was real. But yeah, I was so scared and unsettled and just freaked out that night that I had to watch a kids movie before going to bed. So I decided to watch Scooby-Doo and the Witch's Ghost. Our gang, the Scooby-Doo gang, they find a diary or whatever about a witch. blah blah blah. It was okay. It was during what I considered the golden years of Scooby-Doo, like those 90s movies kind of slap. The 90s and early 2000s movies, bangers. And I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I don't really have much to say about it. You could easily spoil a Scooby-Doo movie, so I don't want to say too much. So I'll just move on. Then I watched Eli. This is about a boy who has an autoimmune disease where the sun burns him and basically boils him alive. So he's invited to this facility that can help him get better. However, this facility is haunted. Yeah. And this movie was just okay. I didn't really see the plot twist coming because of course a movie like this is going to have a plot twist. However, once it happened, I was not surprised in the slightest. I was actually kind of pissed off that I went into yet another movie with this plot line. Like, I remember saying to myself when the plot twist happened, like, I remember, like, face-palming and being like, I should have fucking guessed this. I was so mad. No wonder the dad was pissed, though, like, once you find out what happened, because the dad is very, very pissed off at the mom throughout this whole movie, so you're asking, why, what the fuck happened? Now it all makes sense, and I don't particularly blame him. I will say the last half hour of this movie is wild. The visuals were weird. And it wasn't scary by any means. It was actually kind of funny to me, and I was highly entertained. I don't think it's supposed to be funny. I do think they went for the creep factor. However, I just thought it was hilarious. So I was highly entertained throughout the last 30 minutes of this movie. And my other thing, Sadie Sink is in this movie. She plays Max in Stranger Things. So this is the third thing I've seen her in, including Stranger Things, and she cannot run away from the Max Mayfield persona. I feel like these people always have her playing the same type of character. Granted, she's good at it, so she's clearly being typecasted, but I want to see her doing something else. I know she's in that upcoming movie, The Whale, with Brendan Fraser, so hopefully she has a different persona for that movie. But yeah, 3 out of 5 stars. It was going to be a 2 out of 5 star movie, but then that wild 30 minutes, man. Then I watched Werewolf by Night. This was a pure cover watch. I watched this because of how much I liked the poster. And then it wasn't until I put the movie on that I realized it's a Marvel movie. I don't like Marvel movies. I have a very, very hard time with them. But I decided to watch it anyway because, like, there are some Marvel movies that I happen to like. This was not one of them. It's about a guy who turns into a werewolf, you could guess by the title, and this was boring. It had all the things that I hate about Marvel. There's something about Marvel dialogue, and I know, like, because it's Disney, so I should not be shocked by how corny and cliche the dialogue could be and cringy. However, for some reason, the way Marvel does it, I cannot stand it. So it had everything I hate about Marvel dialogue. It had everything I hate about Marvel acting. I always think the acting in Marvel movies is way too over the top. And it was just boring. I did not have a good time with this. 2 out of 5 stars. And then I decided to watch another Disney thing. It's called The Scariest Story Ever, a Mickey Mouse Halloween Spooktacular. This is just about our pal Mickey Mouse who tries to tell a scary story to the kids. It was cute. That's really all I gotta say about it. A lot of people don't like the newer style of Mickey Mouse animations, but I kind of do. I do find it kind of endearing, and I like how inspired it is by the older cartoons like the Steamboat Willie style. So I actually really do like this art style. Then I watched an older movie from the 60s called 13 Ghosts. I actually watched this one because I did watch that god-awful remake, early 2000s remake earlier in the year. But in the 60s version, it's just about a family that happens to move into a haunted house that has 13 ghosts. And just like with most other movies I watched this month, it was just okay. Like, story-wise, there was nothing too spectacular about it. I could see why it's not really talked about today. However, the graphics were kind of cool for their time, and I think one of the reasons I didn't like this movie as much because there's so much, it was how you were supposed to watch this movie back then that was part of the entertainment value. So back then, like, you the viewer, so in the movie there's like special glasses they wear to see these ghosts, but you, the viewer, also had to wear these glasses. If you were not wearing these glasses, you could not see the ghost either. However, in this day and age, obviously the movie's been re-edited so you can watch it at home without those glasses. So, you know, I'm watching it on Amazon Prime, but these are the only glasses I was wearing. So, like, I got to see the ghost. So I think that watching it the original way you were supposed to took away the entertainment value. And that's probably why this movie didn't age particularly well. Like, story-wise, it's fine, but, like, entertainment-wise, like, the glasses was such a huge gimmick and such a huge part of the advertising that now that it's been re-edited where you don't need them, what's the point? So whatever, 3 out of 5 stars. Then I kind of went on a short film binge. This was a pure total accident, but I had a lot of fun with it. So there's 4 I want to talk about. The first one is Suck a Blood. This is about a monster that apparently, like, kidnaps, kills children, whatever, who like suck their thumb, something like that. The whole thing is told in rhyme, and like it was giving like Tim Burton and Brothers Grimm. Like the look of the movie reminded me of Brothers Grimm, but the storytelling itself reminded me of Tim Burton because Tim Burton's earlier works used to kind of rhyme. And this short film was camp. Super campy. I was kind of here for it. So I gave this 3.5 out of 5 stars. Then I watched Alma. Alma is about a little girl who passes by a toy shop and she sees a doll that looks exactly like her. This one was creepy. No words were spoken. It's all imagery and it still freaked me out. In fact, I would consider this a great use of imagery because they don't tell you what the villain is like. You do have to look around the store. And then once you notice things about the other dolls and like the whole plot twist happens, once it all clicks and you realize what the villain is like, it's just great use of show, don't tell. So 4 out of 5 stars for me. Then I watched one called Fox, which is about a girl who gets kidnapped by foxes, and I hated everything about this. Honestly, I did think the story itself was dumb. And I thought the animation, the art style was kind of ugly. So this is a very harsh review, but it is what it is. And honestly, I feel like this would have worked better as a silent film because there is some voice acting in this that just felt extremely out of place and that it was kind of disorientating, whatever that word is. But yeah. So I hated this. 1.5 out of 5 stars. The last short film that I watched was called Who's Hungry, which is about kids who get kidnapped. And by the end of this short film, I was scared. I was very unsettled, and I'm still thinking about it to this day. And it's so weird because I've seen a lot of short films with this plot line because, you know, back in the day for 2nd grade, they showed us a lot of this. And so I'm not sure why this one fucked me up so bad. It could just be the animation and the character design. I feel like the character design of the kidnapper personifies how a kid would feel in that situation. Because I feel like in that situation, you don't see a normal human being. If you're a 6-year-old being kidnapped, you're going to see them as this big bad monster. And I think they personified that very well. And just the animation was also fascinating to watch because it's just, it feels like pencil drawings. So there's something old-timey about this, I want to say. And in a way, nostalgic, but I don't mean nostalgic like in a good sense, obviously. But like, I feel like as a kid, we all had a fear in the back of our minds of being taken. The pencil drawings remind me of that fear I had as a kid because I feel like if I was like in art therapy or if my teacher told me, draw a scary monster, this would have been something I would have drawn. Maybe that's why it's so scary because it like, even like the style of the characters, they just feel like children's drawings, like a child drawing out their fear. And we all remember things we were scared of as a kid. So it's like, you know, we like to remember the good parts of our childhood, but sometimes those scary parts come up as well, and maybe that's what the short got out of me, just those scary thoughts. Scary thoughts I had as a kid and repressed as an adult. And now it's digging them up again, and I am once again just very uncomfortable. And finally, the last movie I watched in the month of October was The Haunting, which I actually reacted to. I just have not edited it and put it together. That's not gonna come out until 2023. So let's just talk about this one in depth. So I did read The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, which is what this is based on, and I heard this is the best adaptation of that book. So I was very excited for this movie. However, I was not exactly impressed. I didn't hate it. I gave the movie 3 out of 5 stars. Just as an adaptation, I was very disappointed. I remember being very creeped out by the book. However, this movie did not feel creepy. When reading the book, I sympathized a lot with Eleanor, but when watching this movie, I thought she was fucking annoying. She was actually irritating me after a while. They didn't mention the Cup of Stars in this film, which was real weird because when reading the book, I thought the Cup of Stars symbolized Eleanor trying to find herself, which is what this whole story is essentially about. It's about a grown woman trying to find her place in the world, and the Cup of Stars is what started all of that. So it was weird that this movie kept it out. Luke felt really weird in this because I remember him being really nice to Eleanor in the book, whereas in this movie he felt kind of like a dick. Theo's characterization also felt kind of off because I felt like she was a little too mean in this movie. I feel like her and Eleanor were on friendlier terms in the book. Then again, Eleanor is an unreliable narrator, so that's hard. Theo's very hard because even in the book, oftentimes I couldn't tell if she liked Theo or not. I was actually shocked that the movie kept her sexuality in as part of the story, because in the book she's still very obviously a lesbian. It's a lot more subtle than it is in the book, and that is something I actually bring up in my discussion. It's just interesting that a book that came out in the 50s got away with a lot more in that regard than a movie could in the 60s. One of my favorite parts of the book were the stories our friends would tell each other. They would often make up stories. They go on little picnics and do like some make-believe, because I thought it was just so fun reading those, and I just felt like that was part of Eleanor, you know, figuring out who she was, and also kind of just reaching into her inner child and like accepting that. But none of that was in this movie, and like I can kind of understand it, because this movie is already kind of long. It was about an hour and 40 minutes. Like, I understand for time's sake the movie leaving them out. However, I just felt like those stories also enhanced our characterization, enhanced their friendships, and enhanced how tight they all were. And the movie kind of missed out on that, so that's more of a nitpick than a critique, I guess. My biggest gripe with this film is how unambiguous it was. One of my favorite things about the book was that how ambiguous that ending was, because by the end of the book, we truly don't know if the house is haunted or if it was all in Eleanor's head, because throughout the whole book you see Eleanor's steady decline. She is slowly losing her mind, and as the book goes on, she becomes more of an unreliable narrator. In this movie, it doesn't really end the way the book does, because I don't want to spoil it. It includes the book's ending, but whereas the book just ends right then and there, this movie has a whole other scene, there's a whole other monologue, and that monologue, like, the book lets you ask whatever questions you want, whereas I feel like the monologue at the end of this movie tells you what questions you should be asking. And I don't know, there's something about the ambiguity of the book that creeped me out even more. Just like not having answers, I think, enhanced the horror element of the book, whereas when it comes to this film, by telling me what I should ask, it takes away that horror element. It takes away that creep factor. I feel like if they had just left it ambiguous, it would have creeped out the audience even more. However, all that aside, I will say my favorite thing about this movie was the use of mirrors. I thought that was real cool, because the use of mirrors kind of personified Eleanor's identity. And it was interesting because there were some scenes where she was in a mirror with Theo, and during those scenes she really relied on Theo to have some sort of personality, whereas whenever she was by herself in the mirror, it was during scenes where she felt like pretty low about herself or couldn't figure out who she was. So the use of mirrors was real cool in this film. And I know I have a lot of gripes with it as an adaptation. Like, as an adaptation, I truly do think it was kind of shit. I don't think it was as good as people were telling me. As a movie by itself, I think it probably is great as a movie by itself. It's just, unfortunately, I loved the book so much. The book was one of my favorite reads of the year that I read it in. I just loved the book so much that it did kind of taint my entertainment level of this film. However, like I said, I didn't hate it. I did give it 3 out of 5 stars. So in the end, it was okay. I can acknowledge that as a film by itself, it's probably great, but because of, as an adaptation factor, that kind of tanked its score a little bit for me. Woo! Okay, that is it for this video. We got through all 20-something films. I didn't really count them. Let me know down below if you've seen any of these, if you enjoyed these. Let me know some of your opinions, because I feel like my opinion on The Hauntings a little controversial, so I'm a little worried to edit, put together, and upload that reaction. Let me know down below any of your thoughts. If you like this video, give it a big thumbs up, comment, subscribe, y'all know the drill, and without further ado, I'm gonna peace out, and I'll see you guys later. Ciao a tutti.